Welcome everyone, members and guests. I'm going to get started. Just for those of you who just joined, um, please use the Q&A. Alan Twigg, I'll introduce in a second, will be presenting for about 45 minutes to an hour. And so at the end, I will read out the Q&A, and we'll also have a QR code for course evaluations and CE credits. Also, those who are guests tonight, welcome. I hope you join IADS permanently, and please feel free to reach out to me about that. So I want to introduce Alan Twigg. He's a co-owner with Tim Twigg and at Ben Erickson and Associates. And Alan has over a decade of experience in HR and employment compliance. As a speaker, consultant, author, he simplifies complex HR topics. Ben Erickson and Associates, who I've been working with myself personally with my office for probably 20, maybe 30 years. Well, they've been in the healthcare HR for over 40 years, and they focus on compliance, hiring, performance management, and employee retention, believing in creating fulfilling workplaces. And on a personal note, I've had some really positive help through some interesting employee relationships, as well as developing my HR handbook. So with that, I want to thank you, Alan, for joining us and presenting tonight. Take it away, please.
All righty. Well, thank you for that kind introduction. I appreciate it. All righty. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to dive right on in here. And this is all about building your dream practice and some HR strategies to help you achieve that. So today, of course, the reality is the labor market right now is the worst that it's ever been. My father, as Dr. Farber mentioned, has worked in this field and in consulting and dentistry for forever, and he's never seen a labor market as tight or as competitive as it is right now. And as a result, your team is more important than ever. And your team really, we believe, is your competitive advantage. So it's not just your marketing or your website or your technology. It's really the people that are running your systems. And it means that today, more than any other time, it's all about the long-term retention of your good employees. Earlier this year, I was at an event at the University of Washington Dental School, and this was a slide that was put up by the ADA. And the left-hand column is the projected Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics annual openings for those different positions of general dentist, hygiene, and assisting. And these are the annual numbers each year projected over the next 10 years. And then the middle number is the number of graduates who came out of accredited programs in 2019. And of course, you can see, especially for the hygiene and assisting numbers, those are pretty terrible. And then another piece that came out of this was that about a third of the dental assistant and hygiene workforce out there is expected to retire in 5 years or less. So again, this is one of these things where we've talked about this quite a bit with COVID and a lot of the factors that happened during COVID, great resignation, quiet quitting, and so on. And the projections, of course, are that the labor market is not supposed to get really good or any better anytime soon, and it may actually get worse. And then also included in this data were some of these factors that relate to why employees stick around, and also what factors lead to employees leaving your practice. And we're going to talk more about all of these in more detail. So all of that scary stuff that I just put up there is kind of on the recruiting and hiring side, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But of course, right now, you already have a really great team, hopefully, in your practice. You have a team that knows you, they know your patients, they know your systems. And what we want to do is obviously keep those people around. Now, as a little tangent, I will say if you do have someone who is toxic, one of those people that just sucks the energy out of the room, then by all means reach out to me directly and happy to help you work through that. But what we want to focus on is keeping our good employees so that we don't have to go into this crazy labor market. Now, as a result of that, of course, your number one goal we think should be around long-term retention and eliminating what I call preventable turnover. There's a certain amount of turnover that's inevitable. You know, somebody retires, their spouse gets a job somewhere else, maybe they have a medical condition, but there's a whole bunch of turnover that is absolutely preventable. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So it's all about this idea of the long game and creating really good stickiness and long-term retention. So the first recommendation that we have for you here is about clear expectations. And the reason this is on the list is that one of the leading causes of turnover is misunderstandings. And there's a whole variety of types of misunderstandings. There's misunderstandings about pay, about benefits, about the timing of when certain things are supposed to kick in. There's this idea of consistency and fairness and making sure that all employees are treated the same. So there's a bunch of different types of misunderstandings, and all of those lead to a negative feeling on the part of the employee, and that can lead to turnover. Now, one of the most absolute fundamental foundational documents and ways that you communicate your expectations are with your HR employee manual or employee handbook. It's 2024. Every practice has got to have a manual. And when I say a manual, I mean a real policy manual, not something that's 2 pages long, not something that you downloaded off the internet, something that is real and solid and is up to date. Real policy manuals are going to have what I call required policies. These are things like at will, anti-harassment, equal opportunity employment. They also are going to have the things that really tie into state and federal labor laws, things like paid sick leave, paid family leave, breastfeeding and nursing rights, pregnancy protections. These policies need to be up to date for your particular state, the number of employees you have, and so on, because when these rules are out and these benefits are there essentially for employees, then the employees in some cases can find out about these before you do. Your policy manual also needs to have all your benefits spelled out super clear. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then it also has to have management policies. And these are things like appearance, uniform, smoking, cell phone usage. Again, clear expectations so that everybody's on the same page about what the expectations are and we're not wasting our time with misunderstandings. So each of these policies needs to clearly define the expectations both for the employee and for you as the employer so that everyone knows what the expectations are. And it also then helps you kind of have some consistency in your management. Obviously, it needs to be customized to you if this is something that you got from another practice or something that you downloaded from the ADA or somewhere. It really has to be customized, and it doesn't do us any good if it's just all generic stuff. The policies also will allow for more consistent management. So instead of it always just being up to your discretion, how you're feeling on that day, it's more consistent that in this scenario, this is what we do. And it really gives you a nice solid blueprint for how you handle certain employee situations. It'll reduce misunderstandings, especially with benefits. Benefits are where it's the most dangerous misunderstandings are benefits. So it's really important that your benefit policies in your manual are crystal clear, that there's no possibility for any misunderstandings about when the benefit kicks in, what happens at the end of the year, how much you get, are you full-time, part-time, all those kind of things. And then I mentioned this too, of course, all of the required policies need to be up to date and current. And we always say that if you have a really good, solid policy manual, then you can just memorize this 5-word sentence, which is the answer to any question the employee has, which is go look in the manual. And that just makes your life as a manager, as a leader, a lot easier. Now, another piece where this comes into play is with policy updates or changes over time. So one of the things that our company does is we monitor state and federal rules, and when there's a change in the law, we update clients with the new information. In the period from 2014 to 2018, we sent out 74 policy updates nationwide. And these were either brand new policies and rules that had never existed, or these were significant changes to something that had already existed. And then in the period from 2019 through the end of 2023, it was 280. And so far this year, 2024, we're already on track to kind of keep pace with this. And this is another one of these areas where an employee can find out about something or a benefit before you do. And it's really important that every practice has a really good, solid mechanism for staying up to date with the changes that apply to you in your state with your number of employees. So that's the policy manual piece. In terms of some other areas for just good, clear communication and communicating your expectations, the second piece here would be job descriptions. This is just low-hanging fruit. It's super easy. You want to get these in place for each of your positions where you're spelling out the technical skills of the job. You also want to have a section on attitude requirements, things like the ability to work well with others, the ability to accept constructive feedback. Oftentimes with employees, our conflict is not really about the technical skills. It's more about attitude and getting along well with their coworkers and that kind of thing. That should be in the job description for every position. It's also important that your job descriptions have a section on physical requirements, and that's really important when you're handling a pregnant employee or any type of claim of disability. The job description is super beneficial in that process. And of course, overall, it just communicates all of your expectations, and especially when you hire a new person, it allows you to hit the ground running with that person. And then the last area here is with forms and documentation. And again, this is just that whole thing of put it in writing, put it in black and white. You guys know this for all of your charting and record keeping requirements and how important that is. And this is so critical for things like raises, schedule changes, switching from full-time to part-time, any type of performance evaluation, any type of disciplinary warnings. So critical that this is objective and clear. There's the classic thing that if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So really important that you have that, no misunderstandings, and so on. If you want more information about this idea of setting that really solid HR foundation, clear communication, clear expectations, you can scan this QR code and there's some info on there about some additional recommendations in that area. All right, so that's clear expectations. The second piece I have for you here is team communication assessments. So this is kind of in this overarching category of personality and personality assessments and how we all are wired differently. Some of us are introverts, extroverts. Some of us are more detail oriented. Some of us are more big picture. Some of us are very methodical and slow in how we do our work. Others are very urgent and fast, so we get stuff done quickly. There's a whole range and all kinds of possible combinations of these things. And all of these dynamics come into play in the practice when we have humans who are working together. And one of the cool things is that all of these traits and all these personality aspects, they actually can be measured and they can be accurately explained. They can even be predicted. If you've ever found yourself kind of going like, just why does that person talk that way? Why do they act that way? Or if you found yourself or maybe one of your team members saying, I just can't work with that person. Again, in this case, what we're talking about is people that are good employees and how we can all communicate and work better. If someone is a true jerk and is absolutely just one of these toxic employees, that is not a personality trait that's different. But for a lot of our regular day-to-day communication issues, we can actually get around that and really have some really cool results as a result of it. So here are some examples of some of these assessments. Again, sometimes these are called personality assessments. Some of these you may be familiar with. There are certainly others that are not on the list. If you haven't done these, all of them I think are incredibly insightful. All of these have value. It's not that one is absolutely the best, but the one that we do recommend is the Drake P3, just for a variety of reasons that I'll talk about. But again, all of these have value. If you haven't done them, I would highly encourage you to do at least one or more of these. Now, in terms of the high-level goals of doing these, the first piece is just about you knowing yourself, how you're wired, how you operate. even just that alone is great. Out of that also comes that you just recognize that everyone is wired differently, and that makes this whole thing less personal. People don't wake up in the morning intentionally trying to ruin everyone else's day. It's just the way that people are wired. And out of that, then you can learn how everyone can work best as a team, because it improves communication and ultimately it reduces turnover. And that's what this whole talk today is all about. Now, in terms of other things that we recommend that you look for in these assessments, the first is what's called EEOC validation. So this is the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they have approved certain personality assessments to be used in the hiring process for making hiring decisions. The Drake that I mentioned is one that meets that. The Colby is another one, but not all of them do. DISC, for example, is not validated by the EEOC. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't use these assessments in the hiring process. It just means that you can't base your hiring decision on the results of the assessment, unless you're using one of these ones that is validated, in which case you can. So that's just a little important nuance for compliance. We also recommend having an assessment that measures the base personality of the person while also measuring how they might be adjusting their personality in the role, and that's called flexing. Um, it's one thing to kind of know whether someone's introverted or extroverted, but what's really cool is that with some of these assessments that are a little bit more advanced, you can do what's called job matching, and that's where you're comparing the personality of the person with the actual role that they're supposed to work in. And if they've already been in that role for a while, then the flexing will actually measure how much they are, in a sense, adjusting or flexing their base personality compared to what they need to do in the role. So a classic example might be someone who is extremely introverted, but they're doing a role where they're doing a lot of patient interaction. Maybe they're doing a lot of scheduling work and checking patients in and out and so on. So in that case, they're going to have to flex and be a little bit more extroverted in that role. Another area that's really important for these to measure is emotional intelligence, and that's super beneficial. We could easily talk for another hour about emotional intelligence and how beneficial that is, and all the recent research about how impactful emotional intelligence is in the workplace, how different it is from your IQ versus your EQ. But emotional intelligence can absolutely be measured with these assessments, and it's really cool. This one's kind of basic and it should be obvious, but some of these assessments honestly are really hard to use, and the results are kind of confusing, and it's almost like they make them confusing so that you have to use a consultant in order to even understand what the results are. So I think it's important that the report that you get is easy to use, easy to understand. It's not a lot of weird jargon. And then another thing that's really neat with some of these, and the Drake P3 has this in a really great way, is you can do what's called a team analysis, which is where you compare each person on the team with each other. And you see potentially how all of your front office team members work together, how your clinical team works together. And that's really, really insightful. You can also do some profile comparisons. You can look at motivators and demotivators for each individual person. This is fantastic from a management standpoint in terms of learning, what types of environments and work conditions will motivate or demotivate people. And then these can also measure the decision-making and leadership styles, which are also really insightful. So there are several ways that you can implement these in the practice. If you want to just kind of dip your toe in this, you as the leader could do one of these just on yourself, and that could be it. Even just that will be beneficial, because as the leader, you set the tone. And you can imagine, sitting down, say, with a brand new employee and saying, hey, I'm your new boss. We're going to be working together. This is how I operate. This is how I'm wired. This is my pacing. This is my level of introversion, extroversion. Even that is really helpful. If you want to take it a step further, you can do this with your leadership team. If you have an office manager, a spouse, multiple doctors working in the practice, you can do this with the whole leadership team, because again, the leadership team sets the tone. A next step with this would be doing this with the whole team. And again, that creates all kinds of really cool beneficial impacts around communication, how people are operating. It really opens people's eyes and they kind of go, oh, okay, I understand now why you have been operating that way. And it really, again, helps to reduce the temperature, reduce the conflicts, and up the understanding. And then the last, real cool way to do this would be with the whole team and then anybody that you hire on. So when you finalize your candidate and you do a job offer, even before that, you can potentially do it with your final candidate or two. You can do this, and then you can do that team analysis and see how does this new person fit in with the existing team. With all of these, you can do these as workshops, you can do them in person. You may even find that you have somebody on your team that really wants to own this, and it's not even something that you have to manage yourself. There may be someone who is really passionate about this kind of stuff and wants to dig into it. And then when you hire a new person, this person is the one that sits down with the new employee and kind of gets them all plugged in. So again, really cool tools. They really reduce the conflict and improve the communication. If you want more info about the Drake one, feel free to scan this QR code, and there's more info about how that particular one works. But again, all of them have value. They provide really great insights that benefit the whole team. So that's team communication assessments. The next one here is people leadership and culture. So the practice success is all about the success of your individual people. And the foundation of your people success is what we call people leadership. And people leadership is all about prioritizing engagement, appreciation, and really supporting your team both emotionally and financially. Now, here's a little, you can think of this as kind of a little mini homework assignment or a little check. So these are some successful leadership traits. These are things that Gallup and others have consistently shown to be correlated with having a good team and having yourself be, in a sense, respected as a leader. And the first one is just having a positive attitude about yourself, which then leads to confidence in you. And that's kind of what we just talked about around this idea of knowing yourself. Next one here, understanding yourself and how your behavior affects others. This is basically emotional intelligence. Same thing with this about how you can adapt your behavior to the needs of others and understanding your impact on other people. Again, all of this is kind of emotional intelligence 101 kind of stuff. And then it's also about knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are and how to maximize those among your team. And again, this idea of really knowing yourself and understanding where you are coming from as the leader. So in terms of the goals of people leadership, this is another homework assignment for you. So what I want you to, whoops, I went too far forward here. So I want you to go down this list at some point. You can take a picture of this if you want, but I want you to go down this list and put a check in the square of any of these that you feel like are currently present in your practice. And ideally, you should be able to put a check in all of these squares. If you can't, then that's an area to focus on as a leader in this realm of people leadership. Now, Gallup has something that they call their Q12. This is a list of elements in the workplace that consistently relate to employee retention. So businesses that have these 12 things in place consistently have high employee engagement and low turnover. So this is, again, kind of another homework assignment for you. And look at the first one. It's just, I know what's expected of me at work. We just talked about clear expectations. That alone is so big and so impactful. And I know it's not sexy. I know it's not exciting. It's not as amazing as all the cutting edge technology in the dental world right now, but just that alone is one of the most impactful things in employee retention and employee engagement. And again, this is a great example of just basic stuff. When you look down this list, you won't see anything that's super crazy and outrageous or really complicated. This is all just kind of basic human stuff. Now, you guys have probably heard a lot about this. Gallup does surveys on employee engagement and therefore employee disengagement. And I'm sure you're familiar with these statistics. and have seen those before. But the thing that I want to emphasize is this one, that 79% of employees who quit cite a lack of appreciation as the reason for leaving. And in this study that was done of North Americans, just the huge number of North Americans that have received little or no recognition within an entire year. So this is a classic thing in the realm of people leadership, of low-hanging fruit, where you can really move the needle on this. And if you haven't heard of this book, I would highly recommend getting it. We don't have any financial interest in it. We just highly recommend it for how impactful and amazing it is. If you're familiar with the book, The Five Love Languages, this is kind of a companion book that was adapted for the workplace. And it's this concept that we all want to receive appreciation from our employer in different ways. Words of affirmation would be verbal or written. Quality time is getting quality face time with our boss or our manager. Acts of service is when someone steps in and helps us out during a difficult time. Tangible gifts are when we receive a gift that's really personal and really unique to us and who we are. And then physical touch, physical touch in the workplace consists mainly of high fives and fist bumps. We don't usually get too much beyond that. But this is a really great tool. It doesn't take a whole lot of time, and it doesn't take a whole lot of money to implement this. And similar to what we talked about with the communication assessments, these guys developed an assessment that all of the employees can take. And what it does is it basically identifies each employee's primary language of how they want to receive that appreciation. Now, more than likely, you're going to have a whole mix of team members where some people are one language and other people are another. So it's not so much that you're going to always, communicate with people in one particular way, but it does give you a little bit of insight into doing a little bit more targeted appreciation to certain people, because you may find that you give out, say, a gift to everyone, and that gift lands really well with certain people, and with other people, it's just kind of like, meh, thank you. And that may be a sign that that person, tangible gifts is just not their language. Maybe it's something else. So here's a list of a bunch of different ideas for easy ways that you can give appreciation. I'll say a quick story on number 7. When I was at that University of Washington event, there was a dentist in the audience, and we were talking about appreciation. And he said that at his office, he basically buys Starbucks coffee for all of his employees every single day. And he has calculated that over the course of a year, that adds up to about $5,000 just in coffee per year. And of course, you might hear that number and you might go, oh my gosh, 5 just on coffee, that's crazy. But we asked him, well, do you feel like you're getting an ROI on this? Or do you feel like this is actually beneficial? Is this leading to, some sort of tangible monetary result? He felt like this is really impacting his practice millions of dollars in the positive direction because of increased retention, long-term employees that are happy, that show up happy, engaged, who are more productive, and ultimately it leads to higher productivity, higher production, and more financial success. So just one of those examples of the ROI on this stuff. If you want another list, here's another 10 easy ways. I'll share with you number 15. We actually did that here at our office one time. It was very fun, very great. We have employees here similar to you that are mothers, and they don't always spend money on themselves. They're spending money on their families. And so the rules with this were they were given a set amount of money. They had to spend the money. They couldn't just pocket it, and it was cash. They were given cash and they had to spend it. They were not allowed to buy gift cards, so they had to actually spend it on something, and they had to spend it on something for themselves. They couldn't use it as a gift for somebody else. And then what we did was we sent everyone out. They did the shopping spree thing, and then we met later for dinner. And so it was kind of a show and tell of what everyone had bought and why, and we had dinner. So again, you can get as creative with this as you want, but again, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be super complicated. Now, a couple things on culture. So there are a lot of definitions of culture and what it means to have culture and what a good culture looks like. I think all of those definitions have value. This is one that I like, which is that culture is the average of all of the interactions that happen with all of the people in your practice over time. So that's the interactions that you and the team have with the patients. It's how the doctor and the managers impact or have interactions with the team. And then it's about team members interacting with each other. And again, with this definition, what I really like about this is that it's an average. So it's not that you have to knock it out of the park every single minute of every day. It's kind of like Google reviews. If you can get the vast majority of them really good, that's great. And I also like this definition because it's important to remember that your practice culture is continuous. It's not something that you put something on the wall and you're done forever. It's something that is a living, breathing part of the practice every day. And with that, I think it's important to ask some questions about your culture and how you operate. So, for example, what's your reputation in the office? And is your office a place where people really enthusiastically want to come to work? And the ultimate question, would you work for you? And it's important that we can identify that and have that as a little piece of homework. Now, going back to this slide, one of the things that is highlighted there at the bottom is this idea of insufficient pay, and insufficient pay being associated with turnover. Now, I want to emphasize that this said insufficient pay. It didn't say insufficient hourly wages. Pay can take the form of many things, not just hourly wages. And one of the things that I want to suggest in that realm is this idea of bonus and incentive plans. And we'll talk a little bit about this and some of the specific recommendations that we have in this area. So why would you do a bonus system? It's about sharing in the growth and financial success of the practice. Now, all three of those parts are important. It's about sharing, meaning everyone on the team is participating. So it's not just a bonus for these people and nothing for these people. Everyone is sharing. A good bonus system has to be about growth. It's not about paying people for just what we're doing right now. It should be paying people a bonus for going above and beyond and producing and collecting more than what we're doing right now. And it also has to be about the financial success of the practice. Just because we're growing doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually financially successful. So a good bonus system has to include all of those parts and pieces. Now, a good bonus system is also going to lead to greater team and employee satisfaction, and it creates what's called psychic ownership, which is the idea that a team member is not just viewing their job in their own viewpoint of this is my job and what's in it for me, but they kind of start to think about the bigger picture and how their actions and the actions of the team lead to patient outcomes, financial impacts, and how that benefits everybody. It also results in greater productivity. A good, properly structured bonus system will increase revenue and also boost profits. And this is also where we get to shift some of our costs from fixed to variable, meaning instead of just increasing our hourly wages, which is a fixed cost and we have to pay that, we now have some variability. So if there is, for some reason, a downturn in something and our production and collections go down, then we also will see a reduction in the bonus pay, and it corresponds in that way. These also, when they're structured properly, reduce employee-related stress, and they just create a more long-term cohesive view. And again, that idea of psychic ownership. So in terms of some common mistakes that we see in terms of setting these up, the first mistake would be unrealistic expectations. And that's just where you're setting the bar way too high, where it'll take months and months or years to get to that level. So we want to set a goal that is measurable that we can incrementally grow into starting here pretty soon. It's also important that you're taking into account production and collections. If you just base this on production, then it doesn't incentivize the people that are doing collections, and vice versa if it's only based on collections. So it's important that you include both. Now, it's also important that you include some measure of the cost of doing business, because if it's just on production and collections, And if we go out and we hire 25 new team members, our production and our collections are going to go up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our profitability went up as well. And so we recommend, and I'll explain this more in a minute, we recommend basing it or relating it to your payroll costs. Now, another common mistake is getting a little bit too complicated with this and including the entire P&L, because now we start to get into a whole bunch of expenses that the employees have no control over, and that they may not be able to be involved in those making processes. And it can kind of invite the team to get involved in a bunch of additional stuff like insurance and marketing and things that may almost be a distraction of that. And obviously you want to make it as simple as you can. I should be able to come into your practice, go to any of your employees and say, hey, explain to me how your bonus system works. And they should be able to explain it to me really quickly without any weird, complicated, well, on the first Thursday of the month, and if it's a full moon, it's 20%. It should be simple. And another big mistake is constantly changing the rules, where this month it's based on this, and then next month it's new patients, and then it needs to be consistent, because ultimately the killer of any bonus system is resentment, and that could be resentment on the part of anyone on the team. Okay, so this pie chart is how I'm going to kind of lay out our recommended bonus structure, bonus system. So this pie chart represents your current practice business. You've got your employee related costs. You have all of your other expenses, your rent, your dental supplies, etc. And then you hopefully have some amount of profit. The first step in this is you're going to establish what we call the acceptable staff overhead percent. This is where you kind of do a little soul searching about how you currently feel about your team. Do you feel like you're overstaffed or understaffed? Do you feel like if your team did a little bit better job with case acceptance or with phone skills or scheduling more efficiently, do you feel like you could, in a sense, get more output for the same number of labor hours? And out of that, you pick a percent. I'll just arbitrarily say 24% is my acceptable staff overhead percent. That means that I'm okay paying out 24% as my employee related costs. And it doesn't matter whether I'm doing $100,000 or I'm doing $120,000, I'm okay paying out 24%. Now, once we establish that, we run the plan, and what is supposed to happen is the team is supposed to get better, more skill set, more productivity, maybe more efficient. And then what happens is we grow the practice, and when we grow the practice, we create a bigger pie. And again, the idea here is that we are operating more efficiently with the team that we have now. So we're not just going out and hiring a whole bunch of new people. We are being more productive with the same team and the same number of hours that we're currently doing. And if we do that, then what happens is the increase in growth just on that 24% that is the employee related section, that is what becomes the bonus. Now, the white part of that, the one part that says percent employee costs, that is our payroll amount that we've always paid and we continue to pay. And now the additional amount in the growth and in our overall production and collections is what becomes the bonus. While this is operating, we still create additional dollars for profit, and we create additional overhead dollars as well. So with a good bonus system like this, we're taking a portion of the increase, and that's what becomes the bonus. And we still create extra dollars for profit, for growth, paying down debt, etc. And we still have plenty of overhead dollars to cover other expenses like marketing and so on. So this is a structure of a bonus system that we recommend. It tends to, I think, strike a nice middle ground where it's not overly complicated, it's not overly simple, but it's simple enough that the team can understand it and they can have a degree of predictability about what they need to achieve each month and how it all works. And if you want more information about this bonus system and a tracking system that can actually do it for you, you can scan this QR code and learn a little bit more about that. So those are 4 elements. I know this was supposed to be 3 elements, proven strategies, but I gave you 4 instead. Now, to kind of wrap this up, I would just encourage you um, to recognize that I think a common pushback we hear on this is, I just don't have time to do all this. And I think it's important to recognize that you will never, ever, ever magically find time. You'll have to sit down and make the time. With that, I would also encourage you to be realistic, start small, little bites at a time, and just commit yourself to this being a gradual, ongoing process. It's not going to be a one and done. Now, I want to circle all the way back to the beginning about this idea of the labor market and recruiting. Some of you may need to recruit, and you may be in a position where you're actually for sure short-staffed right now and you need to find someone. You may find yourself down the road where some of your team members are retiring and you do have to go out into this terrible labor market and find people. And what I want to emphasize is that if you employ these strategies of appreciation and clear expectation, bonus systems, etc., what that leads to is a happier team. That leads to higher employee retention. That also leads to you as an employer having a really awesome reputation. And what we have seen with practice is this leads to, in some cases, candidates actually seeking out the practice. They'll actually come in and say, hey, here's my resume. I don't know if you're hiring right now, but when you are, I would love to work here. And it actually makes your hiring process that much easier. Another thing that's really critical in today's labor market is figuring out how you can stand out from the crowd. And that's what we call your unique employment proposition, or your UEP. You're probably familiar with your USP, your unique selling proposition, which is why should a patient choose your practice versus the practice down the street. And with employment propositions, we need to do the same thing. If you were sitting down with a really awesome candidate, someone with a great attitude, solid work experience, really good team player, you should be able to clearly communicate to that person why they should choose your practice versus the one down the street. And that's where all this stuff comes into play about your culture, your leadership, your team and how everyone works together. Maybe you have a bonus system in place, how you show your appreciation, that you have a really solid foundation, that you're in compliance with all the various laws that are out there. And the end result of all of that is it does make your recruiting process that much faster and easier. So all of this stuff helps on the retention side, and it also helps on the recruiting and hiring side. All righty, that is what I have for you guys. Here's a little bit more info about us if you're curious. And with that, Dr. Farber, I will turn it back over to you for any questions.
Well, thank you. You gave like, I think 3 or 4 days in 1 hour. So that was amazing. Probably could have a program on each part of that. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Please, I'm going to go ahead and if you've taken down this slide or picture, take a picture. I'm going to put the QR code up, and there's like, I need some questions, folks. Put anything you want in the Q&A or chat now. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask my questions. You don't want to hear my questions. No. Go ahead and share my screen. And before I put the QR code, just a little announcement for IADS. We have some great programs coming up in September and October. And you can go ahead and jot that down or go on the website. And actually, I was going to ask Alan if you could put a little bit of these links or QR codes or have somebody from your office put it on your website. So Alan and Tim have been a supporter of IAD since the beginning. They do have a corporate membership page. So if you need to contact them, that's another way. But go ahead and jot some of these dates down that look good for you. And I'm going to put the QR code. If you can grab your cell phone, if it hasn't been out already. So, yeah, it's been really challenging in Long Island, actually, Alan, for I had, retention and actually just recruitment. There's so many I think I have to work on this unique employment proposition because we don't usually discuss that with candidates, and we assume we're good, but we don't realize how many opportunities they have. I took a little notes on that. Of guess we have to sell ourselves. So I
Yeah,
guess
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and it's really no different than what you do with patients. You know, it's you talk about your skills, you talk about your website, how nice your office is, the modern technology you use, you know. And with the employees, it's just I think it's just thinking about what is the employee experience like, you know, beyond just showing up and getting a paycheck. It's like, you know, maybe there's CE and growth opportunities. Maybe maybe that's one of your employment propositions is you invest really heavily in the CE of your team. There's a whole bunch of different things, and it's not about becoming something that you're not. It's just about recognizing, you know, how do you differentiate from somebody else? And so, yeah, I think it's really good stuff to spend some time thinking about and emphasizing for sure.
anything else you'd like to, any tips or tricks on any of these topics that you'd like to for a takeaway or home? I know you gave us a lot of things to think about and work on. While you're thinking of that answer, just want to share a personal experience. So for years, I've been using Bent Erickson for my practices and had an issue with an employee who was with me for a few years, and they were amazing. I mean, there was a lot of back and forth questions and answers, and I wanted to make sure that in every email, everything I said was the right way to say it, and they would help rewrite some of, we went back and forth on emails with this employee. So if you don't have anybody on your team, a lot of this, I guess, is prevention by what you put together and preventing it from being a problem in the first place. But even so, there's just going to be situations. It's like a new world today. One,
Yeah.
when I look at applicants today, I used to look at how long they stayed in a position, and I was told that that is not true anymore. Like, don't expect people to stay too long. Uh,
Right. Yeah, exactly. I know it is a different world now for sure. And I think that it's important to just recognize that HR is something that evolves and changes, and there is an element of kind of staying up with the times and recognizing some of the generational differences that are out there. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week about the Gen Z, Gen Z generation getting into the workplace and just how much they are looking for meaning and purpose. And I think that's a great example of how the dental profession can achieve that. You know, working in a mid-level corporate environment isn't going to provide a whole lot of meaning and purpose, but working in a dental practice, I mean, think about the outcomes and the impacts you have on patients. It's like talk about that, emphasize that with your team. There's a lot of really cool stuff that can be done there. Um, to really, I think, sell in a way the dental profession to folks. And yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and it's just a matter of spending a little bit of time on it. I know it sometimes seems daunting that you got to spend 20 hours a week on this stuff, but it's really not that much. It's a little bit here and there, and everyone talks about the impact of small habits building up over time, and I think that's really what this is about. So
we have a
just a
quick
matter of
question.
committing to taking some time with it.
Is there anything in the Drake personality test we should look for in an employee to avoid?
Oh, question. Oh, yeah, question. Okay. Um, what I always say is that very rarely would you choose to not hire someone because of what's in the Drake or in another assessment. Um, there are sometimes situations where someone is actually trying to avoid showing their real personality, and the Drake, at least I know, can pick up on that. Some of the other assessments, I don't know if they can kind of throw a message when someone's doing that or not. Um, I think more so it would be if let's say the position requires a certain degree of skill or a certain degree of personality and the person just doesn't have it. And we don't see that very often, but it has happened where, maybe the person is just an incredibly high big picture thinker, and they just cannot handle details, and you're looking at hiring them for a billing position. It's probably not going to be a good fit. So I would say rarely. In most cases, it's just about kind of knowing what you're getting into and going into it with eyes wide open. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, we've used some of those tests, not recently, but we just don't have enough candidates. So I kind of look more at their attitude and like that's kind of what we're looking at. Just don't it's so changed. Anybody have anything else? Because I'm going to wrap this up right on the hour, close to the hour. Alan, I look forward to. I'm sure there's going to be more questions that come up on our community site, and hopefully we'll have some monthly tips like we talked about for our members.
Yeah.
And I look forward to speaking to you soon. Say hello to your dad and the team for me and everyone in IAS. Also, May 3rd, May through the 5th, our live event. Put it in your calendar. If save that date. May 3rd, we're going to be in outside of Washington, DC. We get to see each other in person. So I'm looking forward to that. And I hope to see you in a few weeks at our next webinar. Everyone stay safe. Alan, stay well, and you spell your name right, so perfect.
You
Uh,
too.
have a great night, everybody.
All right. Thank you all.
Bye bye.
Bye.